Hi, everyone. My name is Barbara Dillon. I am the editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press, and I'm honored to be here today with a wonderfully talented and incredibly insightful panel of creators from various mediums to discuss the existing barriers for trans and non-binary creators in sharing their work, the potential actions to be taken to break down those barriers, and the ways that other creators may actively lend and demonstrate their support. First, of course, I would like to introduce all of our wonderful panelists in no particular order. We have Tilly Bridges, who is the author of Begin Transmission, The Trans Allegories of the Matrix. As part of a team with her wife Susan, she wrote for the Monster High animated series and consulted on season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. Future projects include the Star Trek Voyager Homecoming limited series from IDW, a YA queer trans rom-com graphic novel from Mad Cave, and the trans sci-fi short film Long Away, coming to film festivals very soon, which I saw and is wonderful. Tilly's essays on trans life can be found at tillystranstuesdays.com. Tilly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and for doing this.
Of course, always. We also have Hale Leo, who is a mixed media artist and performer out of Southern California. They are gender fluid and use all pronouns. Her poetry has been published in the anthology series Saturday Mornings at the River, and their visual artwork has been featured in multiple queer showcases in the Inland Empire of Southern California. She also collaborates on tabletop game design for expansions on the TTRPG game Fatal Familiar by MC Griffin, and is a part of the California-based burlesque troupe, the Risque Rebels. Hale, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody.
We also have Lawton, who is a comic creator and storyboard artist from the Bay Area. They've worked as a story artist on projects such as Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus, Monsters at Work, and Monster High, as well as Bidoof's Big Stand with the Pokemon Company. Their debut graphic novels are Halloween and Halloween Spellbent, which tackle themes of identity and friendship through a blend of horror and comedy. Moss makes comics with the help of their very loud cat Vincent and has been told they decorate way too early for Halloween, which is not a thing. You can find them online at DINOLICH.com. Moss, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Fully support being Halloween all year round, by the
All
way,
year
to
round.
mention that. And last but certainly not least, we have Shomari Kirkwood, who is a television writer, having written for 4400 and Clean Slate. Over the years, she's worn many hats, having been a member of the fantasy short fiction magazine Podcastle and an apprentice on the award-winning podcast Mother Country Radicals. Born in Kenosha, Wisconsin, she grew up cultivating multiple passions for the arts and writing, as well as the occult, martial arts, and glassblowing. She currently resides in Los Angeles with her loving partner and attention-hungry cat. Shomari, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want the audience to learn about each of you as individuals and how you became creators in your respective fields. So, what inspired you to become a creator, and who or what were some of your influences? Tilly, we're going to start with you.
I've always been incredibly imaginative and spent my childhood telling stories with my action figures. So I think, and I would have done that also with my Barbies if I'd been allowed to have them, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so I've always been interested in story and character and wanting to just make things up, make up stories, tell stories about human beings. And what made me want to get into it, I think it was the moment I realized that that was something people did. Like these comics that I love, these TV shows I love, these movies, they were written by people. You know, you hit that age, you're like, wait a minute, somebody wrote this, somebody made this. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I didn't know how, and it took me forever to get there. But you know, there was so many times in my life, especially struggling as a kid who didn't know she was trans, where there was media that connected with me for reasons I wouldn't understand for years and years and years. But they meant so much to me. They saved me. And if there's any chance, even one thing that I ever create could do that for somebody else, that's the whole point. I want to give back. I want to tell these stories. I want to help people if I can.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tilly. Shomari, what about you?
So I think the moment I really knew I wanted to be a creator came for the fact that I always wanted attention, because I definitely was that kid who was raised to be like not seen more than heard, and in trying to not be a burden on people. But then there's this moment where I've always been a voracious reader. I had saw that someone I had read had this title that was like Grandmaster of Science Fiction and Fantasy. And like little me just said, wait a minute, that is the coolest title imaginable. Astronaut, firefighter, I do not care. I want to be called a Grandmaster of something. And from there, it just became this single-minded chase throughout my childhood of like, okay, so how do I do that? Well, apparently you write books and you get there. You could write TV and get there. Well, I'll just write something and I'll get there. And that was sort of the initial impetus for a lot of it. But as I grew up and kind of realized how constrained I felt often in my town, because I grew up in like Kenosha, Wisconsin, which nowadays is really not like a small town, and even when I was growing up was not a super tiny town, but it's a very liminal town because you're between two major cities. And so there's always this sense of like everything happens out there. Here, nothing really happens. And so for me, where I didn't really know what I wanted to do beyond this art thing, this creation thing, I was like, I need to use this to help me get to where things happen. And I just kind of walked that road and it kept walking it, and it has paid off so far and has led me to finding people who think very similarly of wanting to just make things and fill the world with truth and beauty. And it's kind of a great thing. Every day I wake up and I'm like, oh yeah, I do just do this.
Fantastic. Moss, what about you?
I would say kind of similar to Tilly, where I grew up loving drawing and creating stories, and not really realizing that this was a career path until I saw, it might have been for like Lion King or Shrek or something like late 90s, early 2000s, where I went to the movie theater to go see whatever animated movie, and there was a like featurette of a bunch of storyboard artists pitching in a room together, old school style with paper panels on the walls and the big stick jumping around the room and pitching sequences. And it, like, my brain exploded that this was a job that you could have. This was like, oh, right, of course, somebody had to make this. Of course, a lot of people had to come together to make this. So almost immediately as a kid, that as soon as I saw that, I was like, that's exactly what I need to be doing. I need to be telling stories through drawings. And I've always been really inspired by like animated movies growing up. And more than that, discovering my own taste. I love Tim Burton, and I grew up on shows like Invader Zim and Pokemon, and those things have always been very inspiring to me. Who's always, the weird kid who grew up to be a weird adult. And having those shows give a voice to people who are a little strange, and seeing that, like, oh, great, there's a place for me. That, like, I don't have to assimilate to what everybody else is doing. I can keep being weird. I can keep being creepy and spooky, and there's a place for me. And so those kinds of things have always been a big source of inspiration.
You're in the best place. Hale, what about you?
So when it comes to creative inspiration, my dad was a huge creative inspiration for me. I grew up extremely sheltered, and so not a lot of access to video games, not a lot of access to TV shows. If I did watch it, it was on a VHS that I swiped from Blockbuster and like watched when my parents were asleep. So there was a lot of feeling of like, this is great, but this is secret. And that became like a running thing in my life was art. While awesome, while very fulfilling, everybody in my life had sort of compartmentalized it for this is for the house, or this is the thing that you privately do to survive the horrors. Like this is the thing that you keep your journal full of notes and you don't show it to anybody because that would be scary. but you show it to your family, you show it to your friends because you trust them. And I think that for a while I grew up in that, like in that energy. I would write poetry and I would show it to my mom and be like, I found it online, like it's pretty cool, right? What do you think about it? Do you think it's all right? And she would go, oh yeah, it's good. I'm like, well, I wrote that. And as I got older, the fallout of compartmentalizing your life and what it actually does to you became really apparent. I lost my dad. I lost a lot of people in my life to things where I think that if they had been able to come out and be themselves a little bit more, they would still be here. And then I felt myself kind of skirting to that edge of going like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be life-saving or if this is going to be my secret house that I live in my brain to help me survive not wanting to be here anymore. And the divestment of that was kind of the thing that made me start putting my art out there more, removing the barriers of going, I would rather have people know me for exactly who I am and exactly what I stand for than create a little house inside of myself and then a little house inside of that where who I am really lives. And that's a long way of saying that, like, I didn't get access to a lot of pop culture, but I watched what stories can do to help save people's lives. And then I watched what can happen when you make it into your fortress, but don't let anybody in. And so in trying to let more people in, I started doing more like weird art, more like creative stuff, more stuff that was a little bit more afraid of people seeing. And now that has ended up being my pattern is if it freaks me out, if it makes me a little bit scared to show people, I'm probably on the route that I should be on. And as long as I have people safely checking what I'm about to put out there, like that does end up feeling more creatively inspiring and more in line with what I think I wanted to take away from growing up in that type of environment.
Well, we're so glad that you are sharing yourself with us, Hale, and sharing your artwork with us as well. Before we dive into the topic at hand, I want to acknowledge a challenge that exists simply in panels like this one. For many trans and non-binary creators, there may not be a great many opportunities to have their voices, their experiences, their knowledge heard by audiences at conventions or virtually like we are here beyond inclusivity panels. So what is the impact of this limitation and what has been your experience with this issue? And I'll just open it up to anyone who would like to share.
So for me, I feel like my past year has been like quite a few panels, in part because like of Clean Slate's release and everything. But one of the things I felt a lot, especially growing up and trying to learn whatever I could from other people, because it's true that so many of these panels are how a lot of young artists learn and get insights into how industries work. The fact that so many of the big central ones end up being so absent of people who are gender diverse or people of color ends up really creating this image that you don't really fit into those spaces. And I think it also plays into a lot of how I feel many industries are, where like the further you are in whatever sense from like this platonic idea of like the cis straight white man, the more some people who have real decision-making power shift you towards only thinking you can tell a story or have insights about a story due to purely the identities you have rather than the skill you might possess. When I was just breaking in, I remember I had a meeting with Gloria Calderon Kellett once, and she had talked about how to get her overall deal, she went and did a bunch of podcasts and a bunch of things and had to really schedule all of that herself. And then that ended up being basically the promotion of her name needed to get anywhere. And I think when we consider how panels can be a form of promotion for like who we are and sharing our insights so people know you're a skilled craftsperson, the fact that we're so absent outside of like diversity panels historically means there's a big area where no one's naturally hearing our names as much, and that's really tough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think like those diversity or inclusion panels are good and they're important, right? Like if you have a trans panel and all these trans and non-binary people come, It can be a really wonderful, moving experience, and they want to get into the industry you're in, and you can give them tips and talk about the different kinds of barriers that we face. But when we don't appear on those other panels, if I don't ever, hardly ever get invited to a panel that's not for queer people or for trans people, and so the people attending those panels don't get to see queer and trans people up there, and they don't get to, like exactly like Shomari said, see that we do it too. We are skilled craftspeople who can tell more than just stories about our own specific identities. Like my wife and I have specifically been told when our manager submits us for staffing on television shows that they have a trans writer and they don't need another, or they don't have trans characters and so they don't need a trans writer. And that's, cis het white men are allowed to write every kind of character under the sun, but every marginalized community is expected to only write about ourselves and nothing else. And that's not what the job is. That's not what writing is. We want to tell stories about our communities, but I also want to tell stories about spaceships and explosions and cool laser swords, And so I think the people that run those kinds of panels, and Barb, you are great about this, need to be more inclusive in panels, getting people from all kinds of different backgrounds and marginalized communities to speak on those panels, even when they're not specifically about being a member of that community. It makes such a huge difference.
Jumping off of Tilly's point, I'm not sure when this is going to be released, but we are currently in June. We are currently in Pride Month. And knowing that there are specific months where we're able to celebrate, be more outspoken, be more vocal about things, and know that the general public are more statistically likely to be paying active attention in there is great and is rewarding. But it is in seeing people in August, in January, in months that aren't relegated to the month of the demographic that is being actively marginalized. It does help to show that way we're not relegated to those spaces, and that way nobody is saying, oh, we already have our one, we already have our trans person, we already have our non-binary person, or we already have our person of color, we already have our disabled person, and going okay, there are intersections to that. And that is sometimes, just to kind of build off of that, the fear point that I see a lot of executives, people in decision-making positions go, well, you can't be more than one thing. I'm okay with you being this thing, but you can't be this and this. You can't be queer and a sex worker. You can't be queer and disabled. You can't be queer, a person of color, and actively fighting against genocide or marginalization. You can't be an activist. And if you are, you have to be the right kind of activist, or else you're really hurting the cause. All of those types of things, the cause, the all loud, all encompassing cause, can be really hard to manage while you're also trying to just tell stories. You're trying to be seen for who you are, and you know that those lenses are on you, and you know that either you're the person who was able to maneuver past them, you burst through them, or somebody pushed you or pulled you through. It doesn't seem like that door stays open naturally in this industry. It seems like either people help you through because they go, oh God, I was struggling here, come with me, please. Or it is panels in moments like Pride Month, or diversity panels, where we get to not only talk about what we care about, but explain that these panels, while they do hold value, are not the only thing that we need to have that year-round acknowledgement that we are part of the community. We do make up you. We are part of you. We are part of your con attendees. We are part of your people who create stuff. You may not always know that we are trans. You may not always know that we are queer. We're there, and the safer you make it for us to be able to be ourselves, the more you're going to find out exactly how diverse your group is. And the more you keep the door open, the more diverse it will be. And not just because you wanted to make it diverse to look good, but because you see the value that holds, and you hold that as sacred as the people who are making it.
I'm pretty new to being on panels and podcasts like this, but I've been to plenty of diversity inclusion panels to hear people talk, because I want to hear from people who are like me, or people who have very different experiences than me. Um, but it's so important that we get onto just the regular programming, because we don't want to spend our entire lives just talking about being included. We want to talk about the things that we're making. I was on a panel last year at an animation conference, just talking about storyboarding, just as a creator in the industry who's been working in animation for almost 10 years now. And when they introduced the panel, I just threw my pronouns in as we were being introduced because I was like, you know what? Like, I see some students in the audience who are probably queer and probably want to see somebody who is at a director status who is also openly queer. And so we spent the entire time talking about just storyboarding and working in animation. But when the panel ended, I was swarmed by younger students and industry hopefuls who were like, oh my God, you're non-binary and you're a director. Like, that's what I want to be. Like, you can do this. You can do that and like be also covered in tattoos and piercings and like be in a leadership role. And it was really heartwarming to see that they came to this panel to learn about storyboarding and then also came away with there's somebody like me already doing it, which means I can also do it. And just seeing like them light up was like really heartening. And you're not going to get to see that if we're not being included on those regular panels.
Without having diverse voices involved in the creative process at all levels of production, audiences will not be able to consume stories with truly equitable and varied perspectives. And what I'm hearing from everyone thus far is the difficulty in being pigeonholed for very specific jobs that you're being considered for. But why is it important that these job opportunities extend beyond the creative and into decision-making roles like those in editorial, marketing, above the line, and beyond? What are your thoughts?
I think a lot of it goes to a lot of it goes to like translation almost. I feel like when you're trying to move something forward and you want someone to give you a lot of money so you can make it and make it well and make it to a level of quality and standard, you have to convince them of this story you have, of this vision you have. And when everyone in the room has no idea that there is an entire other way of living and moving through the world that is as real as the way they move through the world, then a few things start to happen. You either start to have to wage many more fights or discussions if we want to be diplomatic about it. You maybe have to play teacher a lot, which now you're doing an entire other job on top of your base job, which is just either exhausting or it means you're going to get half-assed really on both of those, or you're just not going to move forward because they're just not going to have anyone who can say, no, that's real, that's true, in the same way that some other person who can see at least maybe one or two people in the room who looks like them and who can turn to all their other coworkers after that creator leaves the room and says, oh, hey, yeah, no, that was legit. That really moved me. That touched me and it spoke to me. And not having a fear that the specificity of that gets in the way. Because I think as artists, we're very aware that specificity is how you reach universal appeal, really. But for the people who maybe are in the room and don't understand art as well, or don't know how to talk about something, how's the white marketing cis man gonna market the thing by the disabled Black trans woman? He might be like, I don't know how to market this. I don't know if we can market this. And then that becomes an issue. And unfortunately, the weaknesses of the people who have had those decision-making powers, who have the power to control how well you get out there, end up having almost way more power on any individual artist's career. Because when you come out of the room after pitching something or whatever, and if it's not bought or it doesn't go forward or there's issues, it starts becoming this legacy of like, well, this person can never really land a thing. They've never really done X because no one's bought the thing and yada, yada, yada. And it becomes a reflection on you when ultimately you're stuck there trying to reach across to people who are not doing any work to reach across and understand you. And the easiest thing in the world is just to have more diverse people in that room on their side.
Yeah, that matches the experiences that my wife and I have had so much. There was one project we were specifically brought on to introduce a trans character. And at every step along the way, we were educating the entirely cis executive team about what it meant to be trans, why we put the things in that we did. And they will also often want you to talk about your trauma, right? The things that you experienced that only trans people experience about why life's so rough. And so we put a little bit of that in there. And they said, well, wait a minute, you're saying in this project that being trans is only rough because of the way cis people treat you, and we don't like that. Can you talk about what else makes being trans hard? And we said, that's literally it. If people accepted us, it wouldn't be hard to be trans. That's the, and that they, and at every step they pulled it back and pulled it back, and they wanted to do this, but they were so uncomfortable and unfamiliar with it that it all got completely gutted by the end almost. So if you don't have a more inclusive room of people in production, in editorial, you are not going to get more inclusive, varied, diverse stories because so many of other people just they don't understand that our stories don't look like their stories, and that doesn't mean they're bad or wrong. It just means they're different. We have different life experiences, and that gives us a different perspective on things. And so if you don't have those people, yeah, behind the scenes to help who understand that and can say, no, no, calm down. This will be fine. We can do this. This is a real story. This is a real thing people go through. That's why you don't see so many more of our stories getting through because they run into that wall behind the scenes over and over again.
Uh,
There, oh, go
oh,
ahead.
just and it's similarly, like, and that happens at every step of the pipeline. I was working on a show that had a non-binary character and would introduce themselves with like, "Hello, my name is this. My pronouns are they them," which is great. I love that. But I pointed out to the team who was above me that we never actually talk about what that means for the character. That like it begins and ends with "Hello, my pronouns are they them," and there's zero discussion about how that character feels about that. Zero discussion about how that makes them feel, how that influences how they present themselves, how they experience relationships. Meanwhile, we talk about every other kind of diversity under the sun in the show. So, like race, sexuality, um, disabilities. And then this is just like, well, we use the pronouns, so we're done. And we're like, no, no, you're not. That's step one, and it's a baby step. There's a whole staircase over here that we need to climb. Let me take you and grab you by the hand, and let's go up this together. I'll hold your hand while we go, but we have to go up here. And then they see that staircase and they're like, oh, I don't, that looks steep. And I'm like, okay, fine. But you really have to like walk people through it. And you need people in those leadership roles who are willing to help them up that staircase so that we can all be heard and we can all reach the top together.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me just add really quick. I'm sorry, Hale, I don't want to
No, no,
cut you off
please.
or anything, but just that what Moss said is that, my pronouns are they, them is the tiniest baby step. Yes, but also if nobody else ever gives their pronouns for any reason, you are otherizing that non-binary person, right? You have to make it something they all do to normalize the process. So I just wanted to add that because I have seen that happen as well, and you're like, come on now, we're not the only people who have pronouns in this world.
That's an
I was
extremely good point. Thank you.
I was thinking of the exact same thing when I heard you recounting, like, my name is this, my pronouns are they them, and I was like, and now obviously, and now y'all do it. But no, okay. When it comes to the like the data side of stuff, I can see a lot of like executives, especially like in news, when they talk about, oh yeah, that wouldn't sell. We've decided that wouldn't sell. We've run the data, we've run the numbers. There's no market for that. Just flat out number one bullshit. There is a market for it. You guys are not looking for it. You're not actively seeking it out. It does exist. And they're paying attention to the data on a demographic that honestly is not only outdated, but doesn't fully encompass a lot of the people's experiences that are there. A good poll that I have in my brain is immediately I saw the TV glow. that there were a lot of people who, when they hear at first, like, oh, it's a trans story, I'd felt this feeling from friends where they go, I don't know if I'm going to connect with it as much. I keep hearing that it's a story about being trans. And I'm like, come to the movie with me. Just come to the movie with me. Because yes, it is. But also, come to the movie with me. And I walked away with friends also looking into themselves and going, like, maybe my relationship with gender and my relationship with pop culture are intertwined in ways that I haven't really paid attention to. And it led to incredible conversations. And I think that there are executives that at any point are just aching to jettison trans stories as far away from the industry as possible. They are waiting for it. They have their little ripcord that they want to pull, and they go, oh, that's too traumatic. That's too sex oriented. That's not sex oriented enough. That's not trauma oriented enough. Y'all seem like you're having a good time in this one. I don't know if I like that. And being able to have somebody at the lever going, actually, all of these reasons why you would jettison this are ways that you're keeping trans stories limited and homogenized to a point of not being able to engage with it. Of course, you can't engage with it if it's streamlined to one average homogenized thing. That's unengageable. But if you have people who are able to keep those doors open and constantly advocate for the people who are in positions that they've been in themselves, I think that really helps. Like, having people able to vocally go, no, this person is non-binary and we need to have non-binary related conversations in the show, but also you can't trap me in I am the non-binary character. I am also this, and this. And it is through the lens of who I am that me being non-binary shows itself. I like, my pronouns are all of them, but I demonstrate that in my life in the ways that I act and in that I behave that are in accordance with my view with my gender and my relationship with it. And I think if I just walked up and went like, hi, I'm Hale, I have all pronouns, somebody could take that and do whatever they wanted with it story-wise and never actually get to know me or get to know the stories that I want to tell. And so I think trying to avoid the reductiveness at every term like really helps when it comes to having people in those positions of power. I think it's kind of the only way that we end up getting that diversity of story.
Actually, like, going off of your example of I saw the TV low, I feel like that's a great example of just like that was a movie that got brought to, oh, I can't remember which Emma it was. Was it Emma Stone or Emma Watson? I think Emma Stone. I think it's Emma Stone. But it was like, for her production company, it's like, I think the other part of this is like having diverse people in the other side of things is really, really good. But much like with that movie, like with you getting your friend to go see the movie, it's also like we need people to just be curious about the world and like us in the world. You know, it's on some level, I would love for there to be trans people in every executive room as much as I want there to be people in executive rooms who are disabled, who are people of color, etc. But it's also true that, you know, on some level, maybe if your execs have 5 people, you can't get the full scope of humanity in 5 people. But if those 5 people are sourced in a way that is seeking the breadth as best they can, but also are people who are curious rather than people trying to pull the ripcord all the time, it helps so much because those are also the types of people who help normalize our stories as things anyone can engage with. You know, it's no one looks at all of the queer people in the world, and then when they have to sell a straight person movie, they're like, but are the gays gonna go see it? I don't know, Jim. We can't make this movie. And they're like, no, people can understand this. This is love, you know? And you're like, okay, yeah, you know, I'm massive lesbian. I liked Harry When Harry Met Sally. Great movie. But, you know, if you did a lesbian film, there's just as good of odds that a straight person could go in that movie. And if you're not trying to tell them ahead of time, like, oh, it's the lesbian movie, you shouldn't show up, but instead say, hey, look at this awesome movie about love between these 2 women or what have you, more people are going to show up and go, oh shit, that was a pretty good movie. I'm moved. Even if they don't realize they're gay afterwards, they just realize, oh, hey, I am in the same human experience as these other people. Yes, with their own specific trials and tribulations, but they're just people like me, and I can connect to that. And I think that's another big part of it, really.
When
Fully agree with that.
co-signed.
Oh no, just absolutely co-signing it and knowing that that we need allies, but we also need accomplices. Like allies are great, but I need you in there with me. I need you busting that door down. I need you having the harder conversations with your friends when I'm not in the room. Like if I'm not in the room and you're having a conversation with your friends and that person misgenders somebody, I need to know that you're that person that will go, actually, hey, real quick, we're gonna correct that. We're gonna move on, but we're correcting that first. And knowing that the advocacy doesn't stop when we exit. And that we don't have to be in there to keep an eye on people advocating for us. Like I love people who are able to help us achieve that balance, because we also need time to recharge, protect our spoons, protect our community. My friends and I are all sending each other the same $20, so that stuff needs to keep stuff needs to be able to keep going, and we need those allies and accomplices.
Yeah, and jumping off of what both Shomari and Hale said, that one of the Emmas, two Emmas in this economy. Listen, one of them, whichever one it was, bless them, helped get I Saw the TV Glow made, right? And that was a story written and directed by a non-binary person. And it is an intrinsically trans story. It is so trans, and it is so important to so many of us in the community. And that happened because one of those Emmas helped make it happen. And that is what we need so much more of. My wife and I now have a graphic novel that we finished writing last year that art is in production for with a big publishing company. And we got that because the year before I was on a panel, an inclusivity panel, but there was a gay cis man on the panel who has since become a very dear friend of mine. And during the panel, one of the people in the audience said, "What can we do to get more trans and non-binary stories out there? How do we get to see more of these?" And I said, what we need is for people who are already in there to open the doors for us, to help us get through, because so many doors get slammed in our face or aren't even there when we go to try to get our stories told. And he listened to that and he took it to heart, and immediately, as soon as the panel ended, said, "Can I introduce you to my editor? I think from what I know about you, that you would be right up her alley. Your stories would be just what she's looking for." And we met with her and she picked up a pitch like a month later. And that all happened because he listened and said, "You know what? I'm already in here. I went through this door. I can open it for people who are more marginalized to come through behind me, give them the recommendation they need." And that's what one of the Emmas did for I Saw the TV Glow. And we need so much more of that.
When diverse and inclusive stories are not incredibly prevalent in media, which we know sadly they are not, it's often the case that the characters in these stories are forced to serve as archetypes, impossibly trying to represent various intersectional communities and lived experiences. Why is it vital that we have greater opportunities to represent various lived experiences?
I feel like I keep talking first.
Go for it, Shomari. Go for it.
I feel like it's vital because don't we all just want more art? Like, don't we just all want more art that's better art? And to achieve that, we need to keep going and finding those new uncharted spaces and bringing those worlds we've yet to reach, whether fantastical or otherwise, into people's lives. For me, I think that's how we build our sense of humanity as a species, is to remind people that we're connected. Like it's a silly thought I've been having for a minute, but I was like watching this one procedural with my partner for like months now, and the thing I was like noticing is, out of all these years of this one procedural, which I don't know why I'm saying one procedural, it was Law and Order SVU. It's my it's my pleasure that I imbibe every now and then. You cut across all these different lives, and while SVU has not been a perfect show the entire run, I was realizing the fact that all of this is said, here is all of this in New York. All of these people are in New York. Sometimes we're going to be in this community, sometimes we're in that community. Sometimes we're in this community that's near this community, and they're talking or beefing or whatever. But like the sheer amount of times they go around and pull in different communities, revisit communities, view communities from other angles, other perspectives, and other voices, was something that was like, oh, it's really showing you all of these people are in one space. And I think when I look at like the broader scope of our media landscape, and we don't have a fecundity of stories featuring us and featuring us from whether we're way high up here socially or way down here, whether we're in the north or the south or the east or the west or what have you, it ends up making everything feel smaller and other people getting pushed into this darkness in which everyone else who's not there can go and say, oh, there be dragons, there be scary people. No, 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 don't go there. Even though we're just chilling, like in the dark, but we're just chilling.
I think it also like helps if we have more representation, more types of queer people in media, then that gives people more opportunities to see themselves and more opportunities to expand their ideas of what it means to be those things. Like it's been a long conversation for, you know, the token female character in a cartoon or a TV show, or the token Black character. And so you have like, or the token like gay best friend, where these identities become tropes and stereotypes. And so when you introduce a character who is that thing but doesn't look like that stereotype, um, you get people who are like, oh, well, that's not what I thought that was, so I don't want to see that. Or also you get queer infighting, which I also hate, where people are like, well, I'm trans or non-binary and that doesn't look like me, or that does look like me. So if you critique it, then I hate you and you're wrong. And so then it's like, no, we're all very different from each other. We're shouldering our entire community on one single character when we shouldn't be. We should be seeing a range of experiences so that we can all see ourselves and so that other people can see that we're not just one thing.
I think that sometimes when it comes to the like pendulum swing that can happen with representation, just to kind of double back a little bit, my own personal philosophy when it comes to storytelling is that it's the closest thing to magic that we have in this world. Like it is the most like impactful, the most like immediately moving, changing of your body chemistry. When you hear a story, you are like actively sometimes put into that moment and put into that feeling. And I think that there is a double-edged sword where if you don't fit a specific type of trans person, a type of non-binary person, a type of like person at those intersections of other demographics, that pendulum starts to swing of like, well, when can we cut you out? When can we get rid of you? When do we put you on the ice floe? Because somebody's got to go on the ice floe. And it's got to be one of the, like, the bad trans people or the bad queer people. Or, like, there's got to be that. And when you only have one person, suddenly then the entire thing can get thrown away if somebody ends up not being a good person. There are bad people out there. And sometimes people who are in creative positions of power don't do the right thing. And if that's the one trans person you had in the production and they're gone, then suddenly that conversation can be all around, well, do we even have a trans person on the show anymore? Do we even have trans stories on the show anymore? The bleed starts to become very painful because it begins to feel like everyone's being pushed into one form just so that they can be thrown away. And so I think that by keeping, like, making sure that there's a commitment to keeping that intersectionality, not just as a word, but as a practice, that knowing this person has this facet to them and this facet to them, and they all weave into each other, and none of that is disposable, and not one element of this person is disposable, and therefore that person isn't disposable, and their stories aren't disposable, means, and to Shomari's point, don't you want more art? Don't you want more, like, cool stories, kick-ass stories, punk-ass stories, where we get to actually do things that divert from the norm? We are in an era of protest, and an era of need to be able to do that very explicitly. And I think that if we are corralled into needing to be the perfect trans person or the perfect non-binary person, our activism and our advocacy and our ability to live our lives openly and honestly immediately becomes hamstrung.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you. There seems to be some issue. We could hear you. There's some garbling noise with your audio.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Is it
it's
better?
gone now. It's perfectly gone now. But
Good.
we did hear everything you said. I wanted to make you aware, and I
Oh,
didn't
thank you
interrupt
so
you.
much.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. We're 100% good. Anyone else wanted to comment on that before we continue on?
I think my fellow panelists have covered it incredibly well. And the only thing that I have to add is that if you have ever seen an adult, or especially even a kid from any kind of marginalized community, see themselves in a TV show, a comic, a movie for the first time, and you see the impact it has on them to know that they can exist in that world, that they can be superheroes or, space captains or whatever, the way it affects them, how could you not want that? How could you not want to give that to every single kid and adult out there? Because there are so many wide varieties of humans. And the chances of any of us on this panel seeing somebody in a show or a comic or anything that matches our perfect identity and personality are so incredibly slim because we get so little representation. And so the more of that we can do, it gives people so much more, but also it makes your stories better. Why, who wants it all to be the same? Don't you want more stories, different stories? There's so many more to tell.
Beyond the creative process, when and if your story is able to reach audiences, Tilly, this really riffs on your point. What has been your personal experience in seeing the impact of your work with readers, viewers, or listeners?
I have two graphic novels out. They're kind of like middle grade YA age range. And I think my one of my favorite things is yes, I hear from people online, but I often get school librarians reaching out to me with their kids who are trans or non-binary, and they'll send me an email or a DM and say like, "Hey, my student really loved this. They wanted to clarify like, is this character in your book? They clocked that they are using they/them pronouns." Um, I don't make it a big point that this character is non-binary. They just are. And so I get to be like, yes, that character is non-binary, and your student is correct. And then they get to tell me how excited their student is that they related to this character and like want to be this like cool skateboard punk uh who has the same experience that this student does, and that's so incredibly heartwarming that people are the age range that I'm writing to are seeing themselves in these characters, and that's I think just like the greatest.
Yeah, when my wife and I wrote, we wrote the Monster High Halloween special Monster Fest, which Moss worked on, and it was so great. But there's a trans woman in that episode, and the response from the fans online afterwards, seeing a trans woman in the show and what it meant to them, it exploded my heart. It is the best thing ever. Just the way that they were just so effusive and so filled with joy at just this character's existence. It means the absolute world. There is absolutely no substitute for it. It's more precious than platinum.
Yeah, because of Hollywood being the way it is right now, I've had a lot of free time. And I ended up starting this like serialized web novel, really for a lark. It was something I wanted to be the prose equivalent of a sketchbook of just doing something. And I can't tell you enough how like moving it was to write this thing where there was this black trans lesbian at the center of it who is a mess, an utter mess, decimates polycules galore, and then have a lot of my readership end up being people from all over the place. I have a lot of readers from Brazil. A lot of Brazilian trans girls like the thing, and I was like, oh, okay. But it was this bit where they would come to me and they would be like, I've just not seen stories where a trans person got to be selfish and kind of awful, but still have a story say, you're still worth love. Because a lot of trans stories, it's like, if we get to be a bad person on some level, it's traditionally so often been, well, they're bad, because they're trans. It's this like causal link versus, hey, some trans people can just be awful. We can do that. And I think the fact that there is, even for that, people who felt moved and seen because they were like, oh, I dated someone like this person, messed me up. But it's cool to see that you wrote this, that you acknowledge this, or people who are like in the awfulness feeling empowered a little bit because they're like, yes, I should be able to be selfish versus being the ever suffering trans woman in every social situation. And it was just, it was like, shit. I'm trying not to like cry because it was just like, out of things sometimes being so awful, and it's so hard to get trans stories out there. And it feels like every time something does get out there, it's almost like this signal flare where you're like, see, the people have shown that we can do this. And then it just goes dark as night again for a little while, to know that like I could just make a thing and put it out there and really just make it for my community, and then see how much it means to them to have that be there was super moving. And also, I was trying to be really chill about this. I just want to say, Moss, I've like followed your accounts for art since I was in college.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I literally, you know, to prove a point right here, it was like every time I was in college and I had very sad moments of not being understood, it would be like, I'd be like, oh, let me just doom scroll, and then I'd see some of your art and I'd just be like, no, I gotta stay in this. Moss did it. I can do it. And even that's just like really moving, you know? And so yeah.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
That's incredible. I would like, I feel weird even like speaking to that. That's so cool. I honestly just even to follow through with that, my area where I live in the Inland Empire, and there are like areas where it is very queer friendly. I do not live in those areas. I live in an area where it can be a little bit scary to even leave literally with just like short hair, let alone any of the gender presentation I would prefer to do on my day to day. But there is a community center that popped up and became more and more prevalent during the pandemic, called the Garcia Center for the Arts. And every year during Valentine's Day, they would make sure that there is a Valentine's Day celebration for people to go dance, listen to punk music, listen to stuff, and be able to share art. And I made 2 years in a row, made art to be able to be shared there. I often take pages out of Grey's Anatomy textbooks and I put physical objects over them. And there was one that I did where it was like face in repose and two skeletal Halloween skeleton hands, kind of holding it with the knowledge that if you, as the viewer, wanted to, you could physically take them and actually hold the face or let the face go. And like, I am queer, I am trans, I am non-binary, but that art was about being queer, trans, and non-binary and being in love, and knowing that that love comes with its own complications. And do I hold this person? Do I let this person go? And being able to share that in the queer showcase was amazing because I knew that people understood, not only am I talking about love, I am specifically talking about the nuances where me and the people that I've been in love with in my life fall into this space where I don't know if everybody in my life would relate to it. I don't know if every straight person in my life would be able to relate to it. But for that evening, people were able to look at the stuff that I had put from my brain. I'm also autistic, so being able to like convey any thought or feeling from my brain into the world and have it be understood feels like a gift. And like I won something in my little brain of like, I'm alive, I'm really here, oh my God. And that was what it was like, was I'm alive, I'm really here, oh my God. And then like very truly, I'm so glad I stayed. Like that there were so many moments where I could have either gone, I don't want to be here anymore, like flat out here, or I don't want to make art anymore. I'm okay with just kind of killing this part of myself and going back to like just trying to get through every single day. But getting to have people come up and go like, I'm having such a good time. And I would go, oh my God, what have you liked so far? And when they, because I was also tabling just my other stuff and it was not connected to anything there visibly, people would go like, oh, I really like this. I really like this. And it was almost that moment that I mentioned with like sharing with my mom, where I didn't mean to in that moment go like, what do you like? Parentheses, I'm not part of it. But I did get to go like, oh, that's mine. Oh, you liked mine. I made that one. And the fulfillment of them going, I see myself, I see my loss, I see my desire to reach out to somebody and hold them in that painting. Like that means something to me, and that meant everything. I remember crying, like, and wanting to go back and make more of it, and I did. And right now I'm working on a video game, a computer game, where the main character is non-binary and is not a good person. And to Shomari's point, getting to have the freedom of having somebody be a mess, and very much putting a middle finger to the weird stipulations from the Hays Code that still just kind of trickle around of going, if they're queer, they gotta pay for it. If they're trans, they gotta meet an untimely end. If they're this, they have to be bad, and that badness has to lead to this. And isn't that deserved? And being able to go like, gone, like throw it away. This is my character. My character's a piece of shit. My character's troubled. My character has issues, and they sometimes don't resolve every problem in the way that you like might think could be solved. And I like knowing that not only is that freedom there as a character, but that I am also doing it as a non-binary person and making a non-binary character who is like that. Because what better middle finger to the idea that it has to be a certain way than to go, no, not only is it messy, but it's my messy. And I'm not going to restrict the mess to something that will be palatable to you. It's already mess to you. So I'm going to be okay with having it be exactly my mess when I show it to you.
I kind of wanted to just piggyback off of Shomari from earlier, that like this is part of the reason why I'm so vocal about my gender identity is because of reactions like that. I had get it so often that when I first came out, my initial thoughts were my gender identity is not that big of a deal to me. It just is. It's just I like to me I have no gender, so I don't think about it. But then I was getting into these leadership roles and realizing that if I said something or put my pronouns in my Zoom calls or whatever, then people who were entry level or below me were felt more comfortable to put their pronouns or pick a new nickname to try out and felt more comfortable being vocal. And so it became a thing where like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it until I'm in there. And then once I'm in there, I'm going to use my leadership role and I'm going to throw my weight around for everyone else. That I am going to start elbowing people and be like, no, we're not doing that. No, that's wrong. This is how you're supposed to do it. And like being vocal has helped so many people that like online people are like, oh, I love seeing somebody who's non-binary and arrow ace doing the things that you're doing. And I every time I see it, it just makes me want to scream louder and louder about how queer I am. And I'm never gonna shut up about it because people get too much out of it to keep it silent.
Yeah, just to add to that point, when I came out publicly, I was already fairly well known for some other reasons. When I came out, so I couldn't just disappear, right, and come back. Oh, look, I'm a brand new person. People knew, but when I came out very publicly, I thanked all of the trans people that inspired me to believe I could do it too, especially trans women writers specifically, because I saw them out there being trans, being women, finding joy in their existence and still having a career writing. And it made me think I could do it too, right? And I thanked them all in the back of my book. And it makes such a huge difference for those of us that it is safe to be visible, to be loud, to be out, because we inspire others to know that they can do it too. And that's the greatest gift.
Yeah, like to jump off of that, it's one of those things where like by being public, it's how we build history. Because when everything is just sort of kept within the heart, or to use Hale's words, like compartmentalized, it's not that you have to always like, open a vein for the world, we're allowed to have privacy. But when some things are so private that no one really knows, it means you then don't get to have the impact of getting to throw your weight around in a certain way. You don't get to help build a history in such a way that when someone is young and looking around, what can they do? The first thing they're always going to go to is what are the examples? And if all the examples are hidden on some level, it's like, oh, well, then I guess I guess it's not a thing, or you're thinking, well, I guess I have to be the first, or what have you. When, like, for me growing up as a Black trans woman, the first, like, before I had any way to really know what a trans woman really was, let alone that you could be Black and be one, like, bluntly, I only saw them in porn. It was like, oh, okay, so I can't do this. Changing gender is a thing, but it means I'm gonna have to do this. And there was a part of my life where I was like, well, I don't necessarily judge that, but I don't want to do that. I want to be a I want to write. I want to achieve my goal. And then I just was like, okay, but I guess that's the consequence. And then it was like a year later, Orange is the New Black comes out. I saw Laverne Cox, and it was like, oh, sweet, we can go be somewhere else. Like, Black trans women can be somewhere else. And then, like, now, these days we have many more documentaries that are pointing out, like, oh, we've always been around. We've been here, we've been there. We contributed to the development of the synthesizer for trans women, or we were very much some of the early major runway models, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, wow, that's really great. But since all of that was like everyone trying to keep it on the hush hush, it's not as accessible and thus as actionable for people that compared to when we get to move in that bravery and that confidence and that publicness.
I have so many more questions that I want to ask of everyone, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Before we wrap up and share where our audience can find you, websites, social media, I do want to pose one other question and simply acknowledge the fact is, as many of you already have, that we find ourselves in incredibly challenging times. It takes a toll mentally, physically, emotionally, and certainly on your ability to be creative. So what I want to pose to you is if you would each mind sharing one thing of some of the resources you're relying on, whether self-help or professional, to really maintain your well-being during these challenging times, whether that be communities you rely on for support or something else. Does anyone want to share?
I would say for me, it's been going to parties, like just being amongst my fellows and remembering I'm not alone, no matter how much the fascists at large want to make us feel alone. That is really what helps keep me going every day.
Yeah, my number one thing is community with other trans folks, queer folks. It reminds you that you're not alone and that we are all in this together, and that it's okay for some of us to have our moments of weakness, to need support, because then the others are there to lift us up, and then we lift them up when they need it. Nobody can get through this alone, right? Even even when things aren't this bad, you can't get through it all alone. We need community. We need that. But also, I will say that for me at least, I've also found that writing, directing, creating has kept me sane this year, because it allows me to focus on the joy of creation, of telling queer and trans stories, and getting those out into the world. And for a little while, I can imagine a better world for us all. And that's really helped my heart a lot.
Yeah, I would echo that community and being able to go and be among people who know what they're going, like we have very similar struggles, but also there's different perspectives that I can get that I have maybe not been able to either have access to or truly haven't been looking at and need to get my blinders off and look at a little bit more. Being able to be creative, I would say to Tilly's point, engaging in creation. Also to Shomari's point, growing up, I'm fat, I'm disabled, I'm non-binary and gender fluid, and I only ever saw myself in porn. But I also creatively enjoy making porn, making adult content. But when I started to make it, I would go like, okay, well, clearly, obviously, I have to stay in this lane, and then being like, well, why is that? Why is that the case? Why can't this also be the thing that's not being like homogenized and not being streamlined, and being able to go like, okay, not only am I being creative, I'm being creative in ways that push boundaries that I used to have that made me feel like I could never show myself to anybody. This past weekend and the weekend prior, I did my first, like when I said I'm a burlesque performer, that's recent. I am a burlesque performer very recently, within like the last month. And part of it was like drumming on my entire body to In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. But that's like my whole body. And I had never shown that to fucking anybody. And being able to, I would have sooner like left and gone into the desert and never come back like a year ago, because my relationship with my body was either this is something to be hidden or this is a joke. And I wanted to do a comedy act. I wanted to be able to be creative and be among people, and being able to show that off and then have people come up and go, oh my God, that was so shameless. And I'm like, you're fucking right, it was. Yes, it was. And I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to be shameless. That shamelessness has been so helpful in an era that also just like begs you to be ashamed of yourself, and also keeps wanting people to give up. Like there's so much fascist pressure right now to give up on your creative pursuits, to give up on your community, to give up on your friends, your family. And I think every time that we say no, we're doing something that puts us closer and closer to where we should be. And then just as a third thing, art consumption. Like I'm making sure that I pay attention to the art of my friends and my family, and to other queer and trans creators that I maybe, because of the algorithm, am not being like actively given all of the time. I recently read Manhunt by Gretchen Falker Martin again, and I had read it before the first panel that Barbara that you had helped put up, that I was in there. And then Side Shave by Carter Monier. I saw the TV Glow was incredible, and just making sure that I keep that art in my brain and in my heart, know that it's possible, know that it doesn't just have to be me and my friends, and that it is people out there thinking and dreaming and hoping the same for all of us, that we're not going to live a dead life, and that we're going to make sure that the life around us is full of abundance and safety to be able to navigate the heavier storms, because they are here, and we don't do anything by ignoring them, but we also don't do anything by just living in that world. And I think pursuing that balance comes with community, art, and creativity as like a practice, as well as a thing that I'm receiving and consuming.
Yeah, same as everybody. Community is the most important thing for me right now, and going out into the world to see and experience queer art is really important to me. That I make it a point to drag my friends downtown to go to drag shows and like go out and see queer musicians. I just went to a goth pride night last night, and it was so comforting and encouraging to be in a room full of people who are presenting in all different ways, incredibly creative, like outfits and makeup and styling, and then we're all on the dance floor together with like guitar shredding and like drum and bass like reverberating through our rib cage. So it's like you're surrounded by people who are just like you or so wildly different from you, but you're all coming together and you're all feeling the vibration of that music together. And I'm going to, on the flip side, I'm going to like a quieter queer comics reading later this month. And that will be, I went last year and I did a reading, and it's just queer artists showing their comics and reading them out to an audience with also um, stand-up comedy and other like mixed media performances, and that like you have to go out and be amongst your queer community, and that is the most healing and encouraging thing that you can do.
Well, I want to offer my immense thanks to all of you for sharing your experiences, your expertise, and just your lived experience in navigating various aspects of the entertainment industry. It's very much appreciated. As we bring this discussion to a close, of course, I want all of you to be able to share with audiences new and perhaps continued where they can find you. So, Hale, I know we ended with you last time, so we're going to start with you this time. What is the best way for our viewers and listeners to find you?
So for my mixed media art, you can find me at Art by Hale Leo on Instagram. So HALELEO for Hale Leo. And then for performing and burlesque, you can find me on Instagram at Puckfuppet, PUCKFUPPET. Please also check out the game Fatal Familiar on itch.io. There is an addendum / mod to it that's called Heartbreak Boilermaker that's going to be coming out really soon. And then just please keep an eye on me. I'm around.
Excellent. Thank you. Moss, what about you?
You can find me at Dinolich, DINOLICH, on Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr, and recently TikTok. I post all of my own art, share my comics, which Halloween 1 and 2 are in stores now. Highly recommend if you're looking for a funny, all ages Halloween time.
Excellent. Tilly, what about you?
I am mostly on Blue Sky, some would say too much, at Tilly Bridges. You can find me occasionally still on Instagram at Heck Yeah Tilly Bridges. My wife and I have a writing website, which is birdguest.com, that you can go to, that's got links to all of our credits if you are interested in our comics work and television work and our short film and all of those good things. And if you I think you mentioned this at the beginning, Barbara, but my weekly essays on trans life are all at tillystranstuesdays.com.
Excellent. And finally, Shomari.
I can be found on Blue Sky and Instagram under the handle of MX Oberon, where I'm mainly just posting about life, reacting to things with rabid ferocity. Recently finished that new V. Schwab book, Toxic Lesbian Vampires. I've been posting about that nonstop. And as far as for some of my work, I would very much point to Clean Slate. It recently came out in February, but I think people should still see it. It is a very fun, very loving, very aspirational, and in my opinion, comedy about a Black trans woman going back to Mobile, Alabama and reconnecting with her father, and it not being the awful, tragic thing a more tropey or trite story would expect of us. And otherwise, there's also my very silly web novel, The Comfort of the Knife, which can be found on scribblehub.com. And it's, if you just want to see a absolute mess of a trans lesbian slaughter so many people in the name of vengeance and self-destruction, it's there for you.
Excellent. Well, again, a huge thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. This has been Fanbase Press. You can visit us online at fanbasepress.com. You can find us on all of the social medias. You can also find all of our, you can find us on YouTube along with other discussions like this one on various topics. But also you can find all of our award-winning comics, graphic novels, reviews, interviews, podcasts, and more. So again, a huge thank you, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Thanks so much.